Awesome. All right, what's going on, everyone? Welcome to the Mission Driven Made podcast. We have a very special guest today who is a personal friend of mine. So make sure you stay until the end. I first met our guest about 3 years ago at our CrossFit gym, watching him not just train for CrossFit, but at the same time train for Go Ruck events and eventually train for triathlons. He has a master's in counseling, is a member of the American Counseling Association, and is registered in behavioral sciences as an associate professional clinical counselor, excuse me. He specializes in counseling people, helping them recover from trauma, addiction, and relational issues. He has pages of accomplishments, and I'm so excited to talk to him about a few of those today. Just a quick disclaimer, this isn't medical advice, so please reach out to the appropriate person if needed. I want to welcome Grayson Wallen to the Mission Driven Made podcast, where our community inspires people to pursue health, wealth, and purpose in their life. Grayson, it is so great to see you. How is it going today?
Thanks, Jake. Yeah, doing well. It's kind of an overcast day here in San Diego. It's a good Friday.
So is
Yeah.
it 71 instead of 72 there, like it is
It's a
every
little
day?
bit, yeah, it's a little bit chilly. It's actually 62.
62. Oh, dang,
Yeah,
that's cold
62.
for
Yeah.
San Diego.
Yeah. Hence I'm wearing a jacket.
I have noticed people that move to San Diego that are used to being in the cold. The
Yeah.
second they get to San Diego or are there for a month or two, if it goes below 65, it's freezing cold all of a sudden.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
Have you
you
noticed that?
acclimate. Yeah, you acclimate. Because I was from Arizona and, I was used to 110. Like,
Yep.
let's go outside, going on a
Yep.
hike. And then you get to San Diego and it's like, oh, it's 85. I don't know if I could work out today.
Yeah. Oh,
Oh,
good
it's
stuff.
60. I don't know if I can work out today. Yeah.
Too cold. Has to be
Too cold.
72. 72 and
Yeah,
sunny,
probably
right?
72 sunny, nice breeze, but not too much.
Spoiled there with the weather, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Awesome, man. Well, let's dive right into this. So I've heard you say before that you help individuals make meanings of their or make meaning of their emotions to see what's
Mhm.
holding them back from breaking through problems, essentially. So can you kind of expand what this means a little bit?
Yeah. So my belief and understanding of how the mind and the body are connected and how emotions play into that is that emotions are meant to be used as like a sixth sense almost. Like we use our sense of smell to listen or to smell like when hamburgers being cooked or maybe when there's a fire near us or something like that. We use our sense of sight to tell us when something is near to us or um, something sharp we should avoid it, things like that. And our emotions function
Yep.
in a similar way, where like if we're getting afraid, like what are we afraid of? And like if we don't listen to that, then we can kind of run into whatever we're afraid of,
Gotcha.
or if we're feeling angry, like what's provoking that anger.
Okay.
Like
Gotcha.
in other words, like the emotion is there for a reason.
Yeah, that is very interesting to think about. I feel like when I'm asking psychology questions to you, I feel like when you answer, I could sit there and just like ponder what you said for 10 minutes after. It's great.
Yeah.
It's great. And when an individual has a stumbling block in their life that they can't move past, what is normally holding that person back, at least mentally?
Yeah, I think sometimes problems are known. So like you have like a problem with your coworker or your spouse or family member, friend, or maybe a person or an institution, maybe, I'm having a problem with like the government because the government's telling me I have to wear a mask or whatever. Like, oop, that was a little political. Maybe sometimes the problem is just that like it's, an identified problem or a person or a place or situation. But sometimes problems are unknown. Like I don't know why I'm so depressed, or I don't know why I'm so angry. I don't know why, I'm anxious all the time. And oftentimes, those mental blocks are the things that are unknown. And
So,
so how you figure that out or how you come to terms with that is just by looking at what is happening to kind of lead you down the trail of, what the source is of that problem.
so it's even though you don't know where it's coming from, you try to kind of look backwards, if I
Yeah, you
understood that
can.
correctly.
Yeah, so like if your problem is say like that you're feeling sad all the time or someone is feeling sad all the time, It's looking at like, well, what's provoking the sadness? How does that sadness physically feel inside your body?
Right.
And
Okay.
following that, because our minds, I mean, this is called state dependent learning,
Yeah.
and our minds will activate different regions when we're in different, psychological states. And so perhaps something that's making you sad can only be activated, your understanding of what's making you sad can only be activated, when you are in fact feeling sad. But I think the sadness is what people have a hard time, myself included, from time to time, dealing with that sadness,
Yeah.
for example, or that anger or the, you know, fear or what have you. And
And
so we
the
don't, yeah.
and these emotions, they could
hmm
kind of, I guess, for the lack of a better term, just come on randomly.
Sometimes, I mean, I think that emotions happen for a reason. Um, sometimes we cover other emotions with other ones. And so sometimes maybe you're afraid and then you cover that with sadness. So then you get kind of
Yeah.
lost in the sadness, but really it's a fear thing. Or maybe you cover your sadness with anger. So like you
Yeah.
get really explosive towards other people or places or
Yeah.
situations, and it's really not about that.
Gotcha. Gotcha. And generally speaking, what would be a step forward someone could take when they are experiencing a stumbling block like that, especially when it's a mental one or emotional one?
Yeah, I think talking to trusted people and bouncing ideas like, hey, I'm feeling sad and this is why, or I'm feeling angry and this is why, or things like that. I think people are number one resource, and having open and safe and vulnerable relationships. And so I think those people are crucial for emotional health and
Yeah.
relational health as well. Sometimes that's your spouse and son or a partner or friend. Other times it's parents or mentors or therapists.
And so as a counselor, if someone was going through this, like, would you recommend that someone does that first where they reach out to a trusted individual like that? Or is there kind of cases where it should be more of straight to the counselor?
Yeah, I mean, good reasons to come in for counseling are that it's your problem is affecting, your work, your satisfaction with your life. Maybe it's getting in the way of you performing, your normal daily tasks like cooking or cleaning. Um, Maybe your problem is too intense to share with someone who's not, professionally trained to help. Um, those would all be good reasons to come in. But I think that talking with a friend, I mean, that's oftentimes something that I
Yeah.
encourage in light of counseling. Like, hey, go get a second opinion about what we just talked about. See what someone else says. The only hesitation I have with talking to people about like really intense needs
Yeah.
are that like normal, I don't want to say normal people, but like people who aren't professionally trained about really intense needs that people have, like in substance abuse, domestic violence, sexual
Yeah.
violence, trauma, really intense things like that, is that normal people aren't trained, so they don't know what to do with it.
Right.
And
Or
so,
don't know
like,
what to
that could
say,
be,
right?
yeah. And so that could also be like more harmful than good, of like, well, my friend just told me to get over it. It's like, well, that's not really the most helpful thing in light of what I just shared. Or I don't feel
Yeah.
that it really didn't draw me closer to my emotions and give me some closure. That really just kind of told me to bottle it up,
Yeah.
or that person just told me to bottle it up. So,
Yeah. That advice that we could, maybe see on TV might not always be the best
right.
advice for that individual person.
Totally. And I think that like taking the long route of healing is oftentimes what needs to be done, but like
Yeah.
out of pain avoidance, because we all avoid pain. Myself, I mean, this is a human thing. Like, this is not just like a Jake or Grayson thing. Like, everyone avoids pain.
Yeah.
And out of pain avoidance, like, we try and take the shortest route of like, what's going to get me healed the fastest? Well, what is fastest may not necessarily mean that you're not going to relapse later, like in your healing trajectory.
Gotcha. So it can be a bit of a process when someone's healing from something really
Totally.
intense, like some of the situations you just said.
Totally. Yeah. And I think time is a huge factor. Like, how far removed are we from the situation? So I don't
Yeah.
necessarily have like a matrix for like, oh, this
Yeah.
type of problem plus this amount of time, um, plus, X, Y,
Yeah.
and Z, you know, means that you're going to be in counseling for X amount of months or sessions. Like, I don't have that. No one does. If someone does, like, run away from them, because that's not a thing.
Yeah.
But, I think that like how long the problem's been a problem will tell us like how long it'll take to uproot it.
Gotcha.
Basically, like, think of it this way, like, how big is the tree? is it just like a little sapling, or is it like this giant redwood tree? Well,
Mm.
taking out a redwood, well, first off, that's illegal, so don't do that. But second off, like that's gonna take a while to uproot
Yeah,
something like that. So
gotcha. So
yeah, so the longer the problem's germinated or been there, it
yeah,
could change, or it could be quick. Like I'm not saying that it has to be like this hard, enormous thing. Like I think some people, find right to the source of their problems pretty quickly, and it can
gotcha.
be done. Yeah.
And so your approach with people, if I'm understanding this correctly, is probably pretty individualistic as far as like their recovery and talking to them and I guess treatment plan.
hmm
Gotcha.
Yeah, and I think, yeah, there are some themes though, and the themes would be that emotions are meant to be used. And so if we don't
Mm.
use the emotions, then they'll sit inside us and ferment, or we'll be so disconnected from the emotion that it causes other problems, like, people are belligerent, like,
Yeah.
and then, that could be a problem of not paying attention to what's happening around them or inside them or things like that. So, like, from a treatment perspective, looking at what is happening and inviting that in safety and making sure that, the other person, like in a professional counseling setting, making sure that the person knows that, like, I care for them and love them and want the best for them. And then from that place, people can, express their emotion within safety,
Amazing.
which is the healing experience. Like, if we're really kind of boiling it down, the healing experience is I'm fully known and fully loved and fully accepted.
Amazing. Absolutely amazing. Yeah, I definitely feel like someone has some of these issues. It might be hard to talk to someone. At times it's not a professional.
Right.
They might not be as accepting, it seems like, as someone that's, trained in counseling.
Right. And I think, like, even in my personal relationship, sometimes I'll get caught in the weeds because someone's talking about this one little facet when that's not really the
Mm.
focus. Like, they're trying to tell me about something else, but I'm focused. And, like, I think that how that's a human thing. Like, I think that, that even happens like in professional relationships that I have with my clients and patients, but it's not it's not something that, like, is necessarily looked at in normal
Yeah.
society. It's like, well, I told you what I thought. Why are you getting angry? It's like, but I'm trying to tell you,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
So
Is it hard to turn your counselor brain or mindset off? Is it always going when you're hearing interactions with people?
I'm going to be honest with you. When I came out of grad school, one of my professors says, don't diagnose anyone. That's not helpful for any of your relationships. Like, just don't even go there. Just shut it down. So I
Huh.
said, okay, prof, I'm going to do that. And I don't diagnose anyone. That's not even what I do professionally. I do it from time to time, but, like, that's not my focus. But I've
Yeah.
kind of taken that same mentality. There are times when something is inspired in me. I'm like, hey, this is a problem, like, that you should go get some help with.
Got
But
it.
that's all spoken in love.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, so sometimes there's situations where I'm like, hey, yeah, life could be better for you. Do you want life? I mean, are you
Yeah.
okay with this? If you are, okay, like, I'm not gonna pick a fight with you on this, but, I
Gotcha.
think things could be different for you.
Gotcha.
Or when people come to me and they have mental health questions, then that's a cool conversation. It puts me on the hot seat because I don't want to ruin anything,
Yeah.
because it's a sensitive relationship, but that's also a cool space for me to be into.
Yeah. Absolutely. People definitely trust you, knowing your background.
Yeah, thanks, Jake.
Yeah. That's how I've always felt, at least.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, and it's having those conversations, and that's part of the reason why I went into counseling, is I felt this deep desire to normalize mental health.
Yeah.
And I wanted to be a person that people could approach and say, like, hey, is this normal? Like, is what's
Yeah.
happening to me normal? Like, or could things be different?
Yeah.
And so I wanted to be that person for other folks. And so that's not entirely, but part of the reason why I went into this and what I'm seeing in my personal
Yeah.
relationships as well as my professional ones too. I mean, because that applies to those relationships as well.
Awesome. Awesome. And I want to transition a bit to more of mindset. And so you
Yeah.
hear a lot of successful people, for example, a professional athlete, they talk about the importance of mindset. Now, regarding mindset, what separates someone who has reached the pinnacle of their success versus someone that hasn't?
Yeah, that's a good question. What do you think, Jake? I'm just kidding.
I was
um,
like, oh, you put me on the spot
yeah,
here.
no, I think that there's lots of factors that go into it.
Yeah,
One person that I think is probably most notable in the space, in the, you know, sports space right now, is someone like LeBron James or Matt Frazier. And
right.
both those guys spend relentless amounts of time making sure that their, mind and body are in check, and they're eating right, and they're getting enough sleep, and they're cutting out negativity and anything. I think Matt even said, I don't know if I want to quote him here, but I think he said at one point, that anything that draws him away from his goal, he doesn't do.
Gotcha.
So that's relationships, that's
Yeah,
food, and I think that that's a major separator between, people who are just kind of getting by in their
yeah,
life, like they have, people who are hurtful to them, or relationships that aren't necessarily endorsing the best in them, or they have certain types of behaviors that hold them back, um, as opposed to just being relentless with cutting some of those things out. And that's
yeah,
certainly harder said than done. I'm not saying this is an easy task.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Matt Fraser, his mindset, at least from the outward looking, it's pretty incredible. And I mean,
Yeah.
with any professional athlete, to be honest. So, and then
Hmm.
what would you say motivates or drives human beings in general?
Yeah, I think people are motivated by fame and success, and I think other people are motivated by, living a certain lifestyle, or having, certain, benefits. So I think motivation has to do with benefits.
With
So what am I getting
benefits?
out of this? Is it social? Is
Mm,
it interpersonal? Is it financial? Is it what's
gotcha.
benefiting me the most in this, given circumstance?
Gotcha. And so it's
I mean,
normally from
but I don't want to say this as a blanket statement either, because
right.
some people aren't motivated, to do anything good for themselves,
Gotcha.
and so
Wow.
like those folks are motivated by other people being, having good experiences, or something like that. And so I think that there's some complexity to it, because then that's kind
Yeah.
of a mental health integration of like, why can't I do something good for myself? Or why am I really concerned about only doing good things for myself and nothing good for other people? But I
Yeah.
think motivation has to do with like how people benefit.
Gotcha. And so is it like kind of a, I guess you could
Excuse
say,
me.
a selfish paradigm that normally motivates most of us?
Yeah. Yeah. I think
Gotcha.
that's a good way of putting it. Like, am I benefiting from the purchases I make, the relationships that I have, the workouts that I do? I think at the end of the day,
Yeah.
it's all about how we benefit.
Yeah. Absolutely. And
You know,
does a person's value or what they personally value, does that drive it at all?
I think it can, so someone who has, personal values of, being fit, for example, like I think that that kind of gets us through the muck and the mire of like, oh, I don't want to wake up at 5 a.m. to do burpees or something. Um,
Yeah.
but
Right.
I think or eat right, or avoid the Tillamook ice cream or whatever it is. So I think I think that there's lots of reasons. I mean, take that as an example, right? Like
Yeah.
I eat Tillamook ice cream because it's good. I don't buy store brand. We don't mess around.
That's awesome.
We'll pay the extra, $3 to get
Yeah.
the nice stuff.
What's your flavor?
I like cookies and cream, honestly.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah,
There you
but
go.
if we're really getting into it, Jake, they sell small pints, so like not the full size like half gallon, right? But
Yeah.
they smell these like artisanal flavors, and there's a cold brew vanilla flavor
Oh my
that
gosh.
Tillamook does, and we just broke your bank account.
Oh my gosh.
My bank account's still
Yeah.
recovering.
Anything that tastes like cold brew, I am game. I
Yeah,
literally had cold brew just this morning. I just switched to
yeah,
cold brew like 3 or 4 days ago, just since it's been, over 100 degrees here just about every
yeah,
day.
yeah.
Wow. That's life changing right
You're a
there.
true, yeah, you're a true Arizonan now.
That's right. That's
Yeah,
right. And if anyone takes away anything from this podcast today, it's going to be the choice of ice cream and that it
there
should
you
taste
go.
like coffee is the way to
Yeah,
go,
it should
right?
taste like coffee. Yeah, you have coffee in the morning, and that comes in liquid form, and then you have coffee in the evening, which comes in this semi-solid form.
Genius. I love it.
Yeah,
I love it.
yeah. Now, Jake, I mean, what do you have for your ice cream? Like, do you like the ice cream that's like rock hard, or do you like it more like soft serve?
So the best to me is, so you take it out
Be
of the
careful with
freezer
this. Yeah. Okay.
and it starts to melt a little bit on the
Yeah.
edges. So it's
Yes.
cold, but you're getting that
Yeah.
almost milkshake like
Yeah.
taste on the edge of it.
That's the only way to do it.
Yeah.
People need counseling if they don't do it that way.
That's right. I'm going to be calling you every night after I have my ice cream.
There you go.
All right, let's talk a little bit more specifically about mental health. And from my personal experience, it seems that talking about mental health has a bit of a stigma behind it. And then
Yeah.
slowly over the years, especially through the last careers that I was in, it seems like it's a little bit more accepted to talk about, not like universally accepted yet. But have you
Yeah.
found this at all to be the case? And if not, your opinion or thoughts with that?
Yeah. So I'm going to say what I said to a friend just earlier this week.
Yeah,
And that is mental health. And this just came out organically. Like, you ever say those things where you're like, oh man, I just said that. Like, I was not planning to say that.
the
But I
best.
sat with it all this week. And when I saw that you had asked this question,
Yeah,
I was like, oh, this is how I'm going to answer it. So I was like really
awesome.
pumped. I was like,
Oh, I can't wait
this
to
is
hear it.
amazing. Is that mental health is only a stigma to those who don't have it.
Oh, that is good.
Okay, and that's not a zinger. I'm not
That's
trying to
good.
like roast anyone, but really like when people experience the benefit, and this is certainly true in my life, so I'm going to personalize it and use I terms instead of like diversifying and making it vague. Okay, when I have mental health, I'm like, oh, this is the jam. Like this is the best thing ever. Like why do people shit on this or poop on this? Or
Yeah,
like this is so good. But for folks who don't have it, it's like, well, you have issues if you don't have it. Like, of course you should be fine. Based off what you've experienced, like, or even just in pandemic life. It's like, I know we're all seeing this as kind of the end of the pandemic right now, at least in, mid-May 2021. But, this is definitely going to wear on people, and it's not just going to
yeah,
be over in a few months or at the end of the year when, quote unquote normal life comes back at some way. Like
yeah.
this is going to affect us and me and you and everyone for years to
Right,
come,
right.
and our kids too. I mean, this is taken, and I think they're the unsung, victims of all of this too.
Yes,
So
absolutely. And that quote that you just said was amazing. And what I do, I literally have a section in my iPhone for
yeah,
quotes that, not just like for motivation, but more that have meaning behind them that I believe, and I write it down. I have this whole section. So the second we're done with this podcast, I'm going to go into that section
I
and
made it
write.
to the notes. I'm
Yeah,
done.
yeah, you made it there. So no,
Get my book deal, Jake. Yeah.
that was really good.
Yeah, and I think again, I'm not trying to roast anyone. I think it resonated with me as I said it to my
Yeah,
friend. It resonates with me as I say it today. Like, mental health is certainly attainable
yeah,
for anyone.
yeah,
And
absolutely.
so I think there's a stigma when people don't have it, because when people do have it and they see how good it feels to feel good and to love yourself and to love people around you, then and it just flows naturally. It's not
Yeah,
forced. Um, it's euphoric. It's like
yeah,
it's a paradigm shift. That's like,
yeah.
oh, everyone can have this. Like if you don't have it, like come with me. Like let's figure something out. Let's
Right,
make it better for you.
right.
Like that's how, to me, at least how I see it, is that's how paradigm shifting having mental health is.
Gotcha. And so the stigma, essentially it could be just from the opposing party. So whether your mental health is good or it's bad, there could be stigma going both ways, maybe.
Maybe, but I think maybe not. How I see it is
Yeah.
that folks who haven't necessarily experienced vibrant mental health like really shame on people who are like trying to get mental health or who have serious issues like substance or alcohol abuse. I think that there's shame kind of laterally, if that makes sense. Like if there's a group of people who don't have mental health, there's shame kind of like going back and forth. But I think once people, not to make it like a promotion, but like when you kind
Yeah.
of get out of the mire and you get into a place where you do have vibrant mental health, it's really like kind of like a top down, looking down to people who don't have mental health and saying like, hey, how can we get you up here? Like you don't have to live your life anxious or
Gotcha.
hopeless or flat or black and white or fuzzy, or like
Gotcha.
things could be so much better for you. Like what can I do as someone who has mental health do for you to
Yeah.
help you get to where I am? I think that that's a true sign of solid mental health.
That I really liked how you just explained it, because in my mind I feel like I just had a small little paradigm shift, because I viewed it in the sense like, for people that are going through stuff and their mental health is on the poor side,
Hmm.
that the negative thoughts are, coming from people with strong mental
Hmm.
health. So that kind of just shifted my mindset a little bit. That was really good.
Yeah, and I think like even to take it a step further, like mental health is not something that you obtain and then you have. It's not like a
Mm.
degree. Like
Oh,
I
yeah.
have two higher education degrees. No one can take those away from me.
Gotcha.
It's not something that like you just get to and then you're done. Mental health, I mean,
Yeah.
even from time to time, I get depressed. I'm like, oh, Grayson, you're feeling a little bit depressed right now. Like, what can we do to make sense of this and then get back to a place where things could be better?
Do you feel like you yourself personally, when you feel like that, do you take action pretty quick, or
I
do
try
you
to,
you try to?
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I try
Gotcha.
to without being like rash or impatient. But, I think once I try and, I mean, really, for people who, for people who are trying to figure out their mental health, looking at what am I feeling? When did this start? Um, what can I do about this? What can't I do about this? Are all, four really great questions to be asking. And then
Yeah.
that gives you some clarity on, what you can do for yourself. Like, why am I
Yeah.
feeling depressed?
The question
Why am
of
I feeling
why.
anxious? Yeah, yeah, yeah. And just sitting with that. We're not
Yeah.
necessarily saying, okay, why?
Yeah.
Get this done, figure this out.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
hey, what's going on here? As
The
you might a
yeah.
child, like, hey, bud, what's going on here? Like, see that you're upset here. Tell me, and
Yeah.
just having that kind of posture with yourself.
Those questions at least make us think a little bit deeper, it seems like.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And looking past like what's going on and looking, at again the presenting problem with my spouse, problem with my partner, problem with my friend, problem with my work, problem with my finances. Looking below that and saying like, what do I feel about it? And then in light of what I feel like, how am I making sense of this
Gotcha.
to give us clarity on like what to do about it?
Yeah.
Because
Absolutely.
again, the emotion is like to tie in what I said earlier, like an emotion is just like a sixth sense trying to tell us something about our environment here.
Gotcha. Wow. And if someone, a friend or loved one is having issues with their mental health, like in a negative way, they're going through some type of trauma, what would
Totally.
be the way to support them if you're not a professional like yourself? So just the standard layperson.
Yeah, I think communicating love and empathy, avoiding judgment or you should or you ought type of things are really helpful. Um, the research shows on trauma resiliency, like trauma specifically.
Yeah.
We've all been through a trauma, and the trauma is called COVID. Not to maximize it, but also not to minimize it. Like we've all been through some stuff this past year. We've all had grief and loss in different ways, and that affects us.
Yeah.
And so, one of the ways that we can support one another is just by listening and suspending judgment and saying, try and avoid saying, you should be doing this, or I did this when I was in your situation. Just being there,
Yeah.
being loving, being kind. And in the research, that's something that's is shown to help people recover and kind of get out of the funk.
Wow.
Is
Wow.
these strong, safe, secure, vulnerable relationships.
Gotcha. And more of listening than, like
Yeah,
you said, than you should. That's good.
yeah, yeah. So avoiding again, avoiding giving advice, just saying, "Wow, that really sucks,"
Yeah.
and just leaving it there.
It's so
What's that like
interesting.
for you? Yeah.
Yeah. That's so interesting. Like, because even when my wife and I first got married, I remember like if she would go to me with something, like an issue or something, my first thought was, oh, try to fix it and be the problem solver. And then it's funny because I heard over and over and over that wasn't the best course of action, which it took me a little while to learn that. And she just wanted me to listen and
Right.
to hear. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's what we all want down deep inside. It's like, is what I'm experiencing real? Is what I'm experiencing valuable? Is what I'm experiencing welcome to you? So someone
Awesome.
even just saying, yeah, you're sad and that makes sense can be very unlocking for someone. It
Yeah.
could be like just a paradigm shift.
Is there a time, and again, maybe this is too ambiguous, but you're not a professionally trained counselor, someone
Mhm.
comes to you, and then you do listen, but then you do try to give them advice, or is even at that point, is that kind of overstepping boundaries if they'd been through some trauma?
Yeah, I think the only time you should ever give advice is when someone says, what would you do in this situation?
Gotcha. Okay.
And then you focus on me. So it's like, in this situation, if I were you having these types of resources, this
Got
is
it.
what I would do, and this is why I would do it. And that's probably the more important part because
Yeah.
people go for the what, but I think the true gold is in the why. Like I would respond this way because of this factor. Like to me, this is what's most important in all of this situation. But that's
Awesome.
only after someone says, "Hey Grayson, what would you do in this situation?"
Got it. Wow.
Or, "Hey Jake, what would you do in this situation?"
That's that's good. I really like that. I've always kind of wondered that too. Like when is it crossing that threshold or that boundary?
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think like naming what you want and what you need in relationship is really healthy too.
Yeah. Okay.
So I want you to help me with this. Great. Let's do that. And then not doing more
Yeah.
and not doing less. Like that's how you
Yeah.
create safety. I want you to listen to me and tell me that I'm loved. Okay, I'll listen to you and tell you that you're loved. And not
Gotcha.
try and tell you what to do, not try and convince you of my view, not tell you that I think your coworker's toxic, not, all these things. It just, yeah,
Yeah.
that makes sense. Okay, I love you, and that could be that.
Awesome. Awesome. And I've seen so many just incredible stories with how therapy has helped someone defy the odds in, every way possible. I can't imagine how good that must feel from, the counselor or the therapist that's sitting on the other end. So, why do you do what you do?
It's for those reasons right there. I mean, seeing someone
Yeah.
be able to take off the burden that they've been carrying for years or even weeks or months or something, that's something that's really burdened them down, for them to feel free and whole, for them to love their life again.
Awesome. Wow. That's good. That's real good. I like
Yeah.
that.
Because I fundamentally believe any relationship can work, so long as there's safety and trust and good communication. Like I think that
Yeah.
any relationship can work. Um, and I also think that mental health is attainable for anyone.
And when you say any relationship can work, you're talking about not just, romantic relationships, but like friendships and
Yeah,
that type of
totally.
thing too.
Yeah, I think, yeah, I mean, there's an interesting kind of antidote. Can I share an antidote here?
Yeah, I love anecdotes.
Okay.
Let's hear it.
So I think it was in the 70s. You'll have to fact check me here, but in the University of Arizona in Tucson, they did what's called they did an experiment now called the Biosphere 2. Have you heard of the Biosphere 2?
No.
Okay. It was essentially like University of Arizona and I think another university, I can't remember, but it's in Tucson. Anyone can go to this. Maybe not during the pandemic, but it's now a museum. But they tried to recreate every type of landscape under a dome, like in a secure, contained environment. And they went so far as to like export, or I guess it'd be import,
Yeah.
palm trees from coastal or in tropical climates. And they brought in kind of like a ocean type environment, and they brought in, all these different types of ecosystems, animals, all these things. And they tried to recreate each environment under this dome. And they locked scientists. This is where the conspiracy starts. Good idea. Then this is where the conspiracy is. They locked scientists. I think there's like six of them.
Yeah.
They locked scientists in this, dome essentially, and with the intention of them being able to sustain life on their own with no other human contact, for like 6 months or a year or something. I think it was closer to a year. And the experiment failed within like a few months because of human strife and disconnection. But this is where I want to share the antidote.
Yeah.
That's just kind of background.
Yeah.
So in the tropical climate, they found that the trees were falling over, and they learned that trees were falling over because there was no wind resistance. Because in real life, tropical storms will come, and these
Yeah.
trees just like root down because they're surviving these like whiplash winds. And what they found was that just with like a little fan resistance, the trees were not falling over as much, but they weren't as strong. And I think relationships are like trees in that way, where resistance and weight really can make them strong, or they can
Yeah.
crush relationships if it's too much too soon. But adding weight to the relationship over time, where you're building trust and safety and connection, will ultimately make the relationship stronger.
That's real good. That's that is something to think about.
Yeah, and so like
That's
that's
really
why I think
good.
any relationship can work. Like it just takes a little bit of time.
Yeah. And the situation that you're just describing, there
Mhm.
was a movie that came out, I think in the 90s. I don't know if it had anything to do with that. It was a comedy. It was called Biodome. I don't know if
Maybe.
it was like, supposed to be related to that or not, but there was literally a movie kind of describing what you just said. Have you ever heard of that one?
No, I haven't.
Yeah.
I
I,
haven't.
I, I wasn't a fan of the movie wasn't too funny in my opinion, but it was very similar to what you were just saying. That's very
Yeah,
interesting.
it
Yeah.
probably was then. So the reason they called it Biosphere 2 was because Biosphere 1 is, and I know this from the tour that I took, is Biosphere 1 is the Earth. And so they tried to
Yeah.
recreate Biosphere 2 in like a one
Yeah.
kind of localized area. So
Awesome. Awesome. So, all right, Grayson, this is the last part of the show where I give my
yeah.
guests the floor for just a few minutes. Anything you would like to share with listeners regarding mental health? Anything?
Yeah, I said this earlier, and this is kind of my thesis for why I practice counseling and work on getting better in counseling and refining things, is that I think that mental health is for everyone. I think
Yeah.
anyone can have strong, vibrant mental health. It takes time.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say a little bit of time or a lot of bit of time because it's dependent upon a lot of factors. But I think with the right amount of focus in the right areas, anything can happen. And
Yeah.
that's the same for relationships. I think
Yeah.
that within intimate relationships, working relationships, there's only a few things that need to be done. They're hard things to do, but I think there's only a
Yeah.
few of them. And if we can nail those, then those types of relationships will be vibrant.
Awesome. And where can people receive help or even connect with you? Anything that you're willing to share, I'm going to link in the show description.
Yeah, so I have a website, graysonwallen.com. I also have an Instagram handle at Grayson Wallen Counseling, and those are great ways to follow or connect. I have a blog that I post that you can subscribe to. And then I also host couples weekend workshops. The next one is going to be September 11th right now, but we're still working on the dates, and 2021 that is. And if you go to Grayson Wallen /event, single event, it'll just take you right to the next one, like the most current one. So
Fantastic.
yeah,
Awesome.
yeah,
Awesome. And so, yeah, thank you everyone for tuning in to the Mission Driven Made podcast. If you found value in this, please like, subscribe, and share. Grayson, as always, it was great talking with you today. And thanks for the value that you brought to all the listeners. And until next time, everyone, stay mission driven. Awesome.